right. So everyone that's tuning in, I was just introducing our guest for this roundtable on Black and Brown gangs in Chicago. As you can see the names in the font in the corner of their boxes, we got Benneth Lee, who's a historian of Black gangs in Chicago, as well as founder of the National Alliance for the empowerment of the formerly incarcerated. And we got Max Cerda, who works as a street intervention specialist with Build Chicago. So let's show them some love. So let's get started, right? We're here to talk about Black and Brown gangs and the history of Black and Brown gangs in Chicago and kind of the current realities that even motivated this conversation. And each of you has a personal connection to that subject matter. Benneth, let's start with you. When we spoke last week, we talked for almost like 2 hours. And you were involved, you're talking, very openly about being involved in a gang, having been incarcerated, and you've done so much work since then. You even found your own organization, right, to empower the formerly incarcerated. Can you talk to us about some of that personal history with gangs?
Well, I became involved in street gangs as early as 9 years old. It was maybe about 7 of us. We was called the Seven Hoods. This is on the west side of Chicago in the K-Town area. Around 1963. I moved out of that area in 1966 into the Austin community, where it was the dominant white community. And you had some older gang members in that area called Cicero Vice Lords. It was maybe a year later, they noticed me and my peer groups, like 13, 14 years old. We was fighting whites just to go swimming to Columbus Park and to the shows and stuff. And they noticed us. And then they challenged us about being in that era that we had to be vice lords. And that's how my little clique, we became Apache vice lords. And I was recorded as the youngest chief of the vice lord nation at the age of 14. And through that, I ended up in IYC St. Charles, where I did 2 years there. When I came out, I was 17. And the world had changed by that time, from the Black Power movement to the Superfly era. So that's how I got pulled into the street gang piece.
And Max, you were also in the gang, also incarcerated. Now you work as a street intervention specialist with Build. Can you tell us, how or why you believe you became involved in gangs as a youth? What was that mindset?
Before I moved into the Humboldt Park area, I lived on Loomis and Taylor. I didn't know about gang life, but I knew about gangs. There was a few gangs from the area. And I used to get fascinated by them, the way they look, the way they move, and everything. I was just a kid, 9 years old, fascinated with, the crowd. Then, like in '72, we moved to the Humboldt Park area, and that's the first time I faced any racism. I had a culture shock because I was Mexican. And I moved into the Humboldt Park area, and the first grammar school I went to was called Cameron. And every day, them brothers chased me, whooped my ass, because I was Mexican. I didn't, that's the first time I, experienced racism on that level. So sooner or later, I found a Mexican gang around my neighborhood that were experiencing the same things I was going through, with the Puerto Rican brothers and the African-American brothers. So we plugged up with them brothers. We plugged up with the Mexican gang, to fight the Puerto Rican gang, and all that. So I've always had an interest. I didn't realize it then, but now looking back, I know I think one of the things that really piqued my interest was the camaraderie that I seen among the brothers, the canalismo, brothers coming together. That fascinated me. Not so much about the violence, more so than just the togetherness that we had at that time. A lot of people join gangs as kids because they say a lot of kids come from broken homes and what have you. That wasn't my case. I was fortunate enough to have 2 parents, lived in Little Italy. Father always worked. It was just that fascination, man, just the fascination of the grouping. But then after a while, shit got serious.
And so how did you come to the street and what changed? How did you get into the street intervention and violent prevention work that you're doing right now?
Well, at the age of 16, which was back in 1979, I got ambushed. I was with a brother of mine, and he wasn't my blood brother. He was a brother though, and he didn't want to come hang out with me because I was banging too much. And I promised him I wouldn't do none of that if he came visit me. The day he came visit me, we got, they seen me. They ambushed us on Springfield and Thomas, and he ended up getting shot 13 times. He died in my arms, squeezing my thumb, took his last breath. And I didn't have the right people around me at that time to help me navigate through what just happened. I didn't realize that I was traumatized, that my spirit was broken. The day we buried him, unfortunately caught my case. I was tried as an adult. I was 16 years old. I was sentenced 35 years. And I was illiterate. I never enrolled in a high school before I got incarcerated. I didn't know how to read and write. Going to prison, running into brothers that were convicts. That, you know, it was just a whole, again, another cultural shock for me. You know, I'm a young kid walking into a prison, you know, and I'm thinking all kind of stuff. But what the ironic thing was that I met some real educated, real smart, militant-minded brothers that started educating me, helping me. It took a while because I was stubborn. I didn't want to hear it. But then after I educated myself and started studying about my culture, what it is to be Mexican and the social injustices that's taking place, my mind started changing, my mindset. You know, in prison, a lot of people find religion, and I respect that, but that wasn't my case. It was cultura, it was culture that helped heal me. With that transition taking place in my mind, I started educating and started meeting a lot of brothers, you know, Latinos and African Americans that were about organizing, about education, about, you know, empowering the people for all the right reasons, right? And that what led me to where I'm doing today. We even started an organization that we started in Stateville, because we was in Stateville prison, called the Latino Cultural Change Coalition. And 20 years out later, after a lot of us got out, we incorporated. We had an office in Humboldt Park where we worked with ex-offenders.
Damn, you know, it's really weird, kind of like, because I've, you know, even just preparing this, I've like heard and researched like both of your stories and things like that, and it's like hearing them out loud, you know, and not just like through a screen, kind of it hit different. You know, and I'm thinking about, you know, even this idea of their narratives of kind of like what, you know, what gang culture is, or how it's looked, what its origins are, you know, and in doing research for this show, I stumbled across like so many things I don't think a lot of people would even know, right? Like some of the roots of gangs, like particularly even like white gangs, they were like social athletic clubs. And like how certain Black and Latino gangs, right, arose out of kind of necessity as protection against white people in certain moments. And Benneth, when we were talking on that call, I think one of the craziest things that happened was like how swift you were able to talk about the way you've seen gang culture change during the decades.
Well, when you go back in the history, if you ever see the movie The Gangs of New York, that movie was based on a time prior to ending slavery. This was pre-1865, and it was focused on Irish gangs. And they had a relationship with the politicians then through Tiffany Hall. And the Irish gangs played a role with helping the politicians get votes. And a lot of that still happens today, you know. And so when you come into the early 1900s in Chicago, blacks was relegated to like what you call the black belt. Today is known as Bronzeville, you know, in the 20s. And blacks were trying to cross Wentworth to the stockyard and get jobs and try to get housing, because they were outgrowing that era between 27th Street North and 42nd Street South and Wentworth and the Lake. And so they were outgrowing that. And they would run into a lot of confrontation with mainly the Irish gangs. And if you remember the 1919 race riot, the Irish gangs played a dominant role in that. One large Irish gang was the Reagan Coats. This was Frank Reagan, who was the county commissioner, and that was the name of this Irish gang, the Reagan Coats. So the Irish was able to move into politics, open up what you call these social athletic clubs, where they would use the Irish street thugs to attack blacks, attack Mexicans, attack Italians, right? When them Irish guys turned 19, 20, they would get filtered into the police department, the fire department, or some type of city jobs, and you see that presence right today. So now when you go into like the 30s, the great migration of the blacks from the south to the north coming to Chicago, the tension even got a little worse. You first start seeing a recording of black street gangs somewhere in the mid-40s, because they start penetrating the juvenile courts and going into IYC, the Illinois Youth Commission, like juvenile prison. And that's when you start seeing blacks banding together, fighting mainly those white gangs that ran the juvenile facilities. You know, the Italian gangs, the Jewish gangs, the Irish gangs. So they were dominating those juvenile facilities. So blacks band together to protect themselves. And out of that, they formed gangs behind the wall in the youth. And when they hit the streets, they carried it on. As a matter of fact, in 1957, Elwood Pepperlo Perry, he found himself in IYC St. Charles, and he formed the vice lords in St. Charles. Going into the 60s, these movements, you know, you saw the civil rights movement, but the street gangs more attracted to the Black Power movement. The vice lords saw themselves coming into their 20s, and they decided they wanted to do something for the younger youth in the Lawndale area, and they, believe it or not, met with the two police commanders in Lawndale, the 10th and 11th District police commanders, and appealed to them that they were older, they were vice lords, they want to do something different. So those two police officers, believe it or not, helped them organize a conference where the vice lords united with their opposition, the Egyptian Cobras and the Roman Saints, and collectively they pulled off a conference with the support of the two police commanders. So that formed a citywide coalition among the three major black street gangs, and they call it LSD, Lord, Stones, and Disciples. And it was at that time, you only had maybe 25 gang intelligence police officers, but then Daley saw that the black street gangs had the same potential as the Irish gangs in the 30s and the 40s to come into some power. But now these black street gangs was voting, they was putting people in office in their community that they felt would better represent them. They were challenging construction. They were challenging different conditions, right? And they saw this unity. So Daley called it a war on street gangs. I got newspaper clippings showing how the street gangs came together, shut down the rioting, and gave support to those that were victims of rioting, right? But you don't hear that in the news, and you don't read a lot of it in some of the books, right? And so now you saw a trend from black street gangs coming, and then not to mention the Black Panthers came with the Young Patriot, which was a group on the north side, and then the Young Lords, which was a Hispanic group on the north side, and they formed the first Rainbow Coalition. Jesse Jackson didn't come up with that. It was Fred Hampton that united with the Cha-Cha Hernandez of the Young Lords and the Young Patriots. It was a 1966 riot where the Hispanics were saying, no more, we need to be heard too, right? And so now the leaders of the 60s, Malcolm X assassinated, Martin Luther King assassinated, Fred Hampton assassinated, Medgar Evers, Bobby Gore spoke for the vice lords, doing time in prison. Singali spoke for the Stone, got charged with a murder, right? So you saw this going on. And so now the leadership went behind the wall. My generation, we were coming out of the Youth Commission in 70, 71, right? And we got pulled into a new culture. When I left in 69, black people was wearing afros, dashiki, talking about power to the people. But when I came out of St. Charles in 71, people cut their afros off, man. They got permanent hairdos, got rid of their dashiki, got tailor-made clothes on. Jim Brown is not in the show anymore, talking about power to the people. You got Superfly and the Mac. So that was a cultural shift. So now in the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of street gang members were coming out, right? But before that, you can't forget all the rioting that was going on behind the wall. Not just in Illinois, but nationwide, the Attica riot,
right.
Eastville riot. I got caught up in the 1978 Pontiac riot, when they indicted me and 16 other gang leaders, me and Larry Hoover. We were all charged with 15 counts of murder, 2 attempt murder, mob action. Right? Even when the state admitted that they was expecting that riot a year before it happened, because Pontiac was designed to house 600 inmates, but on the day of the riot, it was over 2,000 inmates, right? And so coming from under that in 1981, when we got acquitted, when I hit the street, it was like a shock, a culture shock to me. So now you start seeing street gangs dabbing into drugs, whereas prior to that, we would run drug dealers out the neighborhood. right? Prostituting
Wow.
out the neighborhood. So in the 80s, you had New Jack City. Everybody wanted to be Nino Brown, right? And then in the 90s, Scarface hit the scene. Now everybody wanted to be a gangster. And then you start seeing a splinter. And law enforcement changed how they would address street gangs. Now they wasn't calling them gangs, they labeled them organized crime. State cases now became federal cases because it was gang attached to it. And that's what happened. And that's what you see today, the splintering of these street organizations today, little cliques, because of that breakup of the hierarchy, even in the prison where it was all developed. Now 2 or 3 inmates can't be congregated together. One of them might get transferred. Just to break that up, and you start seeing it on the streets also.
Damn, that is like, we just got like a gangster's history of the United States of America right now, right? After we talked, Bennett, one of the things that I said, that I threw out to, my friends on Facebook was like, someone needs to write a book that tells the U.S. history, but through the perspective of gang members on the street and that were, incarcerated as well, because you can see certain things, right? Like you could see, the way the Black Power movement inflected it, or the way, and the Brown Berets, I'm sure as well, right, Max? Also, the way when they government started abandoning communities and drugs, right, deployed crack and things like that. You could see how it kind of like what it would look like from narrating it from that position. Max, I'm wondering, I think about, it's been decades now since you were kind of first in a gang. How have you seen Latino gangs change, on your end from when you were involved?
It changed in a lot of ways, man. For sure, the number has grown, and it almost seems as the number has grown, the lack of structure has faded away. Because like Brother Benny was saying, a lot of the leaderships started getting incarcerated. And when that started happening, at least within the Latinos, a lot of brothers started falling away from tradition, what it was, what was the purpose of all this from the beginning. Before I got incarcerated in 79, cocaine and all that wasn't in our hood. That wasn't, the cocaine was, with all due respect, was a white man's high. Mm-hmm. And heroin was for them brothers coming from Vietnam that was going through those stuff. So drugs weren't it wasn't a problem on the streets for us at that time in 79. So therefore, at that time, the Latinos that were involved, that were all together, like in the Humboldt Park area, the South Side, they were more together I would say for the right reasons until gunplay got involved. We're trying to protect the neighborhood, making sure that our sisters weren't being stuck up, persons being snatched or raped or whatever. But it seems as we got bigger in number and we felt that pseudo power, and the stronger we became, we felt that, hey man, we're ready to fight anybody, as opposed to directing that energy into something positive, like Brother Benny was explaining the movements that was taking place in the 60s and the early 70s. I wish we would have been around at that era in that capacity in which we was. Things might have been different today. I wish I'd have been able to help contribute, right, in a positive way, that movement, as he said it was, which it was a movement. What we was left with, though, to deal with was a lot of the gangbang, especially among the Latinos, because in the early 80s, majority of every Latino that was incarcerated, we was there for killing each other, for murder, unfortunately, right? But when we started educating ourselves and started really acknowledging the potential that we really have, not just as a gang, but as a people, we was already behind the wall with it. So we started reaching out to our communities, to the brothers in the neighborhood, and try to preach this thing of unity, of Latinismo, brothers coming together, man. We even started to understand the political system. We knew that numbers was important and that we had the numbers, but our agenda was fucked up, man. We weren't seeing clearly because we was like just trying to get our 2 feet on solid ground to help our brothers progress. Not so much in the criminal life and stuff like that, but as a people. We was really stuck on culture, man. Culture was something that you must know, and when you know who you are, as one of our brothers named Booney always says, if you love who you are, how can you hurt somebody that looks like you, right? And that's what, and so our education and our organizing was more based on unifying each other and doing programs, educating brothers. And then like Brother Benny was saying, a lot of the African-American brothers in the prison system were organizing and were changing the dynamics of gangs. Like, we didn't want to be a gang member no more. We wanted to be nation. It was different. It gave a sense of purpose and identity, right? On top of us being Latinos or what have you. When I got out of prison, I got locked up in 79 and got out in 96. When I got out, I was I was in a culture shock again. And I said, damn, what the fuck happened out here? What do we do, man? It was so nuts that brothers that will come visit us and we will talk about unity, about organizing, about politicalizing. When I got out there was nothing that we talked about. It was just a lot of chaos on top of chaos. It wasn't even organized chaos. It was just fucking chaos, man. I got shot. I got out in 96, and in 99, I got shot trying to mediate some problems between Western and Dickens, and some of my old homies, because I was out here talking about peace and unity. My other homies that were still stuck with that, try to use it as man, let's get these fools now. Now's that time. I go, no. I'm gonna take this bullet, goddammit, as a bridge of communication so we can talk, brother. Because this is not gonna solve nothing. We've been doing this shit since the 70s, 69, all the way to 79, 80s, and 90s. We've been killing each other. This shit don't work, man. All we do is becoming our own genocide. So a lot of my personal buddies got upset at me because I could have easily, suggested, hey, man, let's take these dudes down. But I didn't. That wasn't my talk. That wasn't my preaching. My preaching was unity, man. Because I wasn't the target per se. And then when the people who did shoot me realized that they had shot me, they were sending messages, we're sorry, it was this, it was that. And I said, look, let's just communicate, man. So again, coming out of prison, seeing the changes that have taken place among the Latinos, man, it kind of hurted me a lot, man, because I knew we were better than that. We had better potential to organize, and we still do. It's not too late. It's not too late at all. Shit's gonna happen. There's nothing that we can do. There's not a magic wand that we can wave that's gonna stop the gang violence. It's been here since the 1800s, and unfortunately, it's gonna outlive each and one of us on this damn Zoom thing right here. And that's just the reality of it. But that don't mean that we give up, brother. What it means is that we really gotta step up, not give up, step up. And with brothers like Benny and other brothers I've been blessed to rub shoulders with and embrace and work with, I see this. I see the hope, man. It's just, there's no one fixed solution, man. There's no one. Every individual is different. Every mob is different. Every block is different. So, but nevertheless, I believe that despite the change and the breakdown in the structure and all that, I still see hope.
What I was actually thinking about too is this idea of like, we have, when we talk about like gangs being political, we always go to the Young Lords joining the Black Panthers, right? And I think part of that is because it really fits into our, it's documented, right? And then it also really fits into our history of what a revolution looks like, right? And it's a kind of like of how we imagine a revolution and social organization looks like. But what's crazy about the shit that you guys are talking about is like this also was revolutionary shit, right? And it's kind of, and it wasn't necessarily started by activists, right? It was started by people that are forgotten in a lot of ways, or kind of just and criminalizing and gang members and things like that. And so to me, like, what does like non-respectable revolution look like, right? That's coming out of these spaces, I think is like. It's fucking crazy. It's not even an idea that I thought about. One of the things I do want to do right now, because we're running out of time, is pivot. And Max, I just want to really quick, because I think, there's that documentary that came out, Violence Interrupters, about, 10 years ago now almost. And I still think that people really don't understand like street intervention, right? But I know that street intervention is really important last week when shit popped off. And so what, can you talk to us a little about like what are the philosophies and objectives of street interventionist work?
Well, I'll tell you what the philosophy, what it means to me as a street intervention specialist. People get involved in social justice, especially brothers that have been involved on the streets, because we're tired of our self-destruction taking place. We understand these little brothers and sisters. They're our kids. They don't come from Pluto or some fucking where else. They come from our home. These are our kids. And so I think that the brothers that gets involved with street intervention that had, that were from the streets, that don't mean that those are the only people that can help street involved people that was involved now. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that the brothers that eventually got involved with street intervention in the city of Chicago really helped make that effective, because kids want to be understood. A lot of times adults don't understand us. And majority of our kids, majority of those adults that have been in their life had let them down. So that's a factor that a lot of people don't talk about. So kids don't trust adults. They trust their own peers, man. And we were their peers. We're just grown. We're educated. We become men. And when we connect, we always say in street intervention that we're only effective as they are receptive. And how do we make these little brothers and sisters receptive? Well, we got to be genuine. We got to be empathetic. We got to understand. Don't judge, and be there, and literally fucking be there. I get calls 1, 2, 3 in the morning on Fridays and Saturdays. You can't say, hey, the office is closed, I'll holler at you, stay safe. Work like that. You gotta go out there, man, because you'll lose whatever you've established. Because these kids, sometimes we're the only one they got. So this is one of the things that, and a lot of people think that the only one that can mentor an African American or a Latino is an African American or a Latino. That's not true, man. That's not necessarily true. Would it help to have the experiences? Of course. But is it necessary to have this experience to be effective in somebody's life? No, sir. All you got to do is have the ganas, is love your people, man.
Ganas.
That's it. You got to have those ganas, man, and have a organized network system set up of resources. Because once the good talk and the connection and everything is made, and we're helping these, you're going to realize just how many social needs they have. Not just the kid, the family as well. And we have to have a whole set of resources ready to tell this family, okay, this agency can help you. This referral can help you get here, or whatever it is.
What would you say, like, and I also want to tease out what happened last week, all of that kind of stuff, and kind of clarify some misconceptions. But what I would say is, like, I think it's like what people can do, right? Like, and what, or is there shit that people can do, right? Because I also know, Benny, even just thinking about some of the stuff that formerly incarcerated people go through and trying to rebuild their lives, which is exactly one of the things that motivated your organization, right? So what are the ways that, like, people can help your work, directly, or what are the ways that, the other ways that people can follow your work, or do any of that stuff?
Spending time is one thing, but doing the work with a person coming out of prison is another thing, right? One of our biggest struggles is that, one, we all form incarcerated, convicted people. I mean, we got backgrounds. You got these larger organizations that got a history. These are what I'll call the usual suspects. They're the ones that's getting the grants every year. So it's hard for us to compete with them. They got these savvy grant writers. They established a history of managing grants. Well, we're trying to develop that history. So we get shunned a lot. So people can get behind us if they know people in places that grant the grants, right? That review the grants, right? And start, like we met with State Rep Sean Ford and Camille Lilly, and they're pushing that some of the monies that's coming down in Illinois go directly to some of the grassroots organizations. Stop giving it to these large.
How it should be.
According to your question about what is that people can do, people that are interested, especially teachers, counselors, people that are engaged with youth, they need to enroll in some kind of trauma-informed care. Because, like I said, these kids are traumatized, man. And if we don't understand what trauma-informed care means and how trauma affects behavior, we would only see the surface of the kid and not inside of him or her. Being effective is understanding. Like a doctor, you gotta know what the disease is. You gotta know that disease, man, how it affects the body, and that's what people gotta do that wants to get involved in this field, man. Learn about trauma-informed care, and like Benneth Lee said, man, you gotta be real, man. You gotta want to help kids to get into this field. I mean, there's and then there's always a flip side to this. I had kids that I helped end up getting killed after I helped them, and it imbalanced me. I felt like, damn, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. How the fuck I let this kid get killed? But and that's out of guilt. Because when we allow guilt to enter our mainstream of the work that we do, we become real ineffective. We even not, well, for a moment, like me, I stopped believing that what I was doing, I was in the wrong field. I said, this is not what I'm supposed to do. Because when this one kid got killed, I got him out the gang, got his tattoos removed off his face. And then like 6 months later, his mother called me 2, 3 in the morning, brought me up crying. I didn't even know who she was. I couldn't understand her. And when I got to the hospital, he had already passed. May he rest in peace. And that tilted my scale, man. Like I said, you know what? I ain't shit. This work that you're talking about, you're doing, it ain't shit, man. You're not doing nothing, man. You got this, couldn't save this kid. So I was beating myself down because I got involved with this brother, because I seen all his potential, his change, his transformation, and then they snuffed him out, took his life. And I was not sure that if what I was doing was the right thing. When I go to think and stuff, I haven't done it lately, but when I really go, I go to the cemetery. And that time I spent like a damn near a week in that cemetery just thinking about it. And it came to the realization I did help this little brother. He was on his way of doing the right things in his life. But this is just some of the things that come with this field that we gotta understand, that you gotta have a psychological distance, man.
Thank you all so much for being here. I fucking don't even know you all, but I love you all, and I appreciate the shit that you guys are doing. Thanks so much.